Hello, hello. How are we all doing today? Duality, Archet, lifting. It's okay. We'll be back on... don't know if we're gonna do another Friday stream. We'll see. But VOD's always available. I've cursed you with the knowledge. I was reading it right before stream. I'm on chapter... Oh, my phone is by my bed. I'm on one of the later chapters. I've been looping that song. Yes! You get it, don't you? You understand me. You understand me so much. Can you see it as vividly in your mind as I can mine? I really want to board it. I was kind of thinking about, like, just boarding the first 30 seconds just to, like, get it out of my brain. Because I'm too dedicated to the Dave project to, like, dedicate myself to doing anything too big. But maybe I'll just board it for fun, just as a little side thing. We'll see. But I have been thinking about it a lot. I did an escape room today, which was really fun. I went with my friend Amanda and her girlfriend, and it was a great time. So, but I'm a little bit tired today. I'm a little bit sleepy, but we're still gonna read. I was wanting to go to escape room. They're really fun. I've done about maybe 4 or 5 of them, and every time they're a blast. You gotta have a good group for it. There aren't any around where I live, Sag. Dang, that sucks. They're becoming more popular, I think. Or at least I see them around my area a lot. But I also live in a pretty big city, so... Or at least a really touristy city. So maybe that means that there's just more in general. We're gonna vibe for a couple more minutes and then I'll get started. But I live in Fields, man. There ain't shit here, yeah. Hold on, let me... Okay. There we go. Had to make sure something was in the right tab. But I worked a little bit more on those, the cute beta kid charms, like, designs that I was doing. Dave is almost done. Jade is also almost done. I just have to do a little bit of, like, shading and the kind of final little touches for them. They're quite nice. They are the sillies ever. They're my favorite sillies. I'm debating whether I want to make one for... I might make a Carcat and Solix one just for fun for myself. If I was going to actually sell them, I think it would be a good idea for me to make all the trolls and all the alpha kids and beta kids in the same style. And like have every option. But I'm also lazy, so... And I also don't want to draw Gamzee or like Aridin. But maybe I will. And in their god tier, they're fun to do. Though I don't know if I would do the trolls in their god tier, because I would kind of try to stick to the most recognizable outfit that they're in. Which is why I put the kids in god tier. Are we getting to chapter 19 tonight by any chance, Smile? I was looking ahead at word count. We probably will read 19, I think. We'll see how we're feeling. But if we can, I would like to end on finishing 19. So, speaking of that, we should probably get started. So I'm going to do my thing where I turn off the music. And we're just gonna get into it. So yeah. Alright, let me have my little guy. Okay. Alright, so this is chapter 17 of The Fall of Rome by Acrylicmist. And here we go. Dave stayed inside and stewed over the thousands of online profiles that Club Deuce assembled for him until Sunday evening. By that point, if Dave stayed inside and looked at a computer screen for another 3 seconds, he'd fucking lose it. It had gotten to where Dave wasn't even sure if he'd recognize one of the potential victims, even if he stumbled across their page. Everything was starting to blur together. Dave leaned dangerously far back in the kitchen chair, balancing on 2 legs, wobbling just enough to get his adrenaline going to shake the stiffness out of his limbs. Slick, he loudly complained at where the Fed was seated at the counter. I need a break. The agent didn't even look up at him. Then fucking take one, he said. I don't want to, Dave said stubbornly. Then, drive me to Carcats then. That counts as a break, right? Slick didn't even have to think about it. No, he growled out, still not looking up. Too dangerous. Dave rolled his eyes behind his shades, even though he knew his handler couldn't see. Then give me a panic button or something. That way you'll know if I ever need help. Slick huffed, at last wryly glancing up. Does that mean you'll actually agree to wear a panic button if I give you one? I make no promises, Dave warned. But maybe. Then he grinned evilly. Or you could let me carry a huge-ass knife or some shit. That way I could protect myself. Slick snorted, incredulous. No fucking way, he said, trying not to laugh at the ridiculous suggestion. The very last thing I'm going to do is arm you. What the fuck, kid? Dave shrugged, half joking, half serious. I know how to handle myself in a fight, he reminded the Fed. Probably more than you do. Slick ignored the slight challenge, closing his laptop to rub at the space around his eye patch. I'm not worried you'll fuck around and stab yourself by mistake, he admitted. But like hell am I letting someone as jumpy and twitchy as you go around any sort of blade? Not even for protection? Dave prodded at the boundaries of what Slick would do to keep him safe out of curiosity and boredom. In a way, he was glad that the Fed was so insistent about him staying weaponless. If Dave never had to hold a sword again, he'd die happy. Not even then, Slick confirmed. Besides, he said, if it ever gets to a point that you actively need a knife to defend yourself, it's too late. Dave nodded along with the Fed, cheerfully joking about his own demise. Rip me, then, he deadpanned. Dump my body in the nearest ditch and call it a day. He meant it as a joke, partly to keep away the very real truth that if he ever needed a knife to defend himself from Bro, he didn't have a chance in hell of surviving. For all the times he'd fought back against Bro, he'd never won once. For some reason, though, Slick seemed uncomfortable by Dave's answer. You know, he said thoughtfully, I wouldn't throw you in a ditch somewhere if worse comes to worse. You'll get a proper burial out of me. No shortcuts either. He held up a hand, vowing. I'll even bribe the Undertaker to take extra care of your headstone. Dave laughed. Aw, he said, disappointed. But if you lay me to rest properly, how can I justify my righteous haunting of your ass from the afterlife? Don't you want the ethereal spirit of my presence to bother you forever? Slick merely grunted and turned away. I've already got people haunting me, he said. I don't need the weight of a few more souls on my conscience. Dave shot up after that, foot lodged so deep in his mouth that he couldn't speak around it for a few seconds. It wasn't hard to imagine that was the truth, and Dave wondered how many people before him Slick had been ordered to protect, and how many of them he'd let down. So, your annoying ass is staying good and alive, Slick told him sternly. No knives, either. I'm not tempting fate any more than I have to. He paused, considering Dave from his seat at the counter. Also, I think I'll take you up on that panic button suggestion. I'll have clubs look into it. Fine, I'll wear your panic button, Dave said, negotiating with all of the skills of a YouTube comment moderator. But you have to drive me over to Carcat's house. Give me one good reason why I should, Slick asked smugly, opening his laptop again, secure in his victory. From now on, it's either here or the school only, no exceptions. Dave brought out the big guns, shameless in his pursuit of seeing Karkat again. Because I might have kissed him Wednesday before my life was ruined. Slick went very still, fixing Dave in place with a look of shock. He quickly composed himself, though, settling into a careful apathy. Good thing I don't have a bleeding heart, then. You're staying here. I'm not putting your safety at the whims of your teenage hormones. Dave pushed harder. I also might have told him I loved him. Slick's lips disappeared into a thin, hard line. He looked overwrought, but when he let out a pained sigh, Dave knew he'd won. Fine, Slick broke, nearly growling, but there was a part of him beaming with pride that he was actively trying to hide. Go get in the fucking car. Dave nearly skipped outside, eager to get gone as he texted Karkat. ETA like 8 minutes. You have one giant ass shitload of an egotistical persona coming in hot. Karkat answered back in an instant. Egotastical isn't a word, dumbass. Does this spectacularly obtuse and generally confusing string of words refer to the fact that you're on your way over? Hell yeah. I finally got Slick to unchain me from the dungeon of his overprotective tendencies and borderline neurotic watchdogness. I'm pretty sure the guy sleeps with a hunting knife tucked lovingly under his pillow, like something out of a shitty two-bit action movie directed by college film majors, trying to be both edgy and original, but instead landing firmly in the hashtag tropey bullshit area of bad characterization. Slick started the car. The sun was up and the shadows stretched their twiggy hands across the gravel and dirt driveway, cutting strips out of the ground from the pine trees across the road. The sunset was out in full force, painting the sky red and orange amber. Dave looked away. The mix of colors bothered him. You sound like you're either in a good mood or trying hard to hide the fact that you feel miserable. How so? The degree and length of your metaphors are directly related to how you're feeling. I noticed that trend weeks ago. A part of Dave was secretly touched that Karkat had apparently noticed an idiosyncrasy unique to him, but another part was slightly off-put by how transparent his emotions were. Shit, what happened to his poker face? Still, he had to test the waters. He had no idea where he stood with Karkat now. What did one short press of the lips mean when weighted against what Karkat must now think of him? Why shouldn't I be in a good mood? I'm coming to see you, aren't I? They must have pushed too far, because Karkat didn't text him back, and now Dave's belly was a mess of snakes and rolling with nausea. He'd fucked up. Slick pulled silently into Karkat's clean-cut neighborhood. Ground rules, the Fed said, his finger tapping at the steering wheel. I know this kid's not a fucking idiot. I know he's probably put some things together on his own, and asking you to lie to him is not only shitty but impossible. But please, for the love of fuck, don't give away any secrets that might get somebody killed. Remember, there's still a case we're building, and a lot of people I trust are currently engaging in some very dangerous activities trying to hunt Strider down. I won't have you endanger them by flapping your gums on your crush. Got it, Dave agreed distractedly. No spilling state secrets. There'll be no treason out of me today, Mr. Scary Cop, sir. Please don't lock my ass up in old Guatemala. I swear it was only a little nuclear launch code that I smuggled into enemy hands. Slick shot him a sideways look, bemused. Feeling nervous there, Dave? He asked knowingly. Butterflies in your stomach? More like tactical missiles, Dave muttered, embarrassed. You talked to him any since shit hit the fan? Slick asked. Dave gulped. Not really, he answered, feeling evasive. Slick pulled into Karkat's driveway. The sunset had begun to die down, the colors darkening into the night sky as the car idled. Dave, Slick said, his voice serious. I'll give you 2 hours. Feel free to call me any time before that, though, and I'll come pick you up straight away. Got it, Dave said, feeling sick all over again at the prospect of the upcoming confrontation. He fiddled with his seatbelt, ready to get this started. And Dave, Slick said, as he opened the car door, ready to leave, be careful. Follow your heart and remember you don't always need to see eye to eye to someone to understand their point of view. Why are you telling me this? Dave asked nervously. Slick shrugged his shoulders, staring straight ahead. All us old folks remember being young and in love, he said, and that was rich coming from someone who had to be under 40. It's hard as shit, even without all the extra bullshit you're dealing with. I just want you to be happy, kid. Dave's throat felt tight at that. No one had ever considered his happiness before, and hearing the out-loud confirmation that Slick actually cared about him being happy did funny things to Dave's chest. He didn't know how to respond to that without seeming like he cared or felt touched by the consideration. so he just shrugged and said, "I'll try." Dave stood in the driveway and watched as Slick's car vanished down the road. That strange feeling in his chest didn't go away, though. Instead, it buried itself deeper, nestling inside between his ribs to remind him that maybe things will turn out right after all. He walked up the driveway to politely knock on the front door. The sound echoed. It took nearly a full 60 seconds for Dave to hear the bolt lock being thrown open, and the door was yanked back. Karkat stood there, his eyes taking in Dave's slouched posture, his hands in his pockets, chin downturned, like he was waiting for the condemnation to fall and the door to swing shut in his face. Instead, Karkat threw himself forward, hands on Dave's shoulders, as he looked all over Dave as if checking to make sure he was in one piece before crushing him in a hug. Dave didn't really react well to the sudden lack of personal space. He flinched back, tensing all over as Karkat's arms surrounded him with gentle pressure. Karkat was speaking, though, comforting words as he pressed his face against Dave's chest. "Oh my god, I thought I'd never see you again. Are you okay? You're okay, right?" The worry in Karkat's voice made a knot form in the back of Dave's throat as he considered the question, slowly relaxing, accepting the embrace for what it was as he leaned into the other boy, head bowed to answer in a quiet murmur. "I'm fine, for now." The "for now" seemed to remind Karkat the last time that they'd seen each other. Dave had completely lost his shit in the most uncool way possible. His street cred was ash by now. Karkat pulled away just to glare at him, his eyes red and hot and angry. "Inside," he ordered, heralding Dave towards the open door. Dave surrendered without a fight, drifting through the doorway. Karkat knocked it behind him, moving on automatic. The only expression Dave could read on the werewolf's face was anger, and Karkat's shoulders were a rigid line. So it was going to be like this, then. Dave had dared hope, just for a moment, in Karkat's arms, that things wouldn't be like this, that somehow, through some miracle, Karkat wouldn't hate him. Dave knew what to do. He crossed into the familiar living room and took a seat on the couch they'd once shared. Karkat carefully sat down on the other side, as far away as possible. The distance between them spoke volumes. Dave didn't say anything. He waited for Karkat to break the silence because he was a coward at heart. "So," Karkat began, not looking at him. His hands were folded in his lap, the fingers interlaced. When the question came, it was different. It was from a different direction than what Dave had expected, but every bit as damning. "Your last name is Strider." Dave closed his eyes. The media still didn't know that he existed. This wasn't some crazy theory Karkat had found lurking in weird-ass chat rooms. This was the direct result of pieces of truth Dave had never said out loud, but Karkat had still seen etched between his scars and the way he flinched back at loud noises, the point driven home in the orange spray paint that read "Little Bro." The logical leap was one that the media still hadn't made. Karkat was just that fucking sharp. Or maybe Dave was just that readable. "Dave?" Karkat asked again, slightly hesitant, and Dave realized he'd been staring at nothing with his eyes closed for over a minute, because for all that Karkat must know by now, Dave had never admitted anything, and this specific question was the downfall of all of Dave's misplaced hopes. He forced himself to speak. It wasn't nearly as hard as he thought it'd be to answer. "Yeah, it is," he said. "It feels good as shit to admit that, too. I missed my last name. Rest in fucking pieces, Jackson Lalonde, and his piece of shit name. At least now I can be me again," he said. Too much. He was aware of that, but damn, it felt good to hear his real name out of Karkat's mouth. "Dave Strider," Karkat said, testing it out loud. He nodded to himself like he approved of the name, and Dave felt his heartbeat flutter. "So the Strider on the news is..." He trailed off, waiting for Dave to answer. "Bro," Dave admitted. "Don't know the fucker's real name. I only ever knew him as Bro." Karkat nodded again as more pieces of the puzzle snapped together. "And he's... like... my dad, I guess," Dave said, sounding it out. That part he'd always been uncertain of. There'd never been any hint of a mother of any kind, and Bro had zero notable contact with any physical other people that weren't his online dark web buddies. It would have been the easiest thing in the world to imagine that Bro had straight up kidnapped him or something if it hadn't been for Dirk, who, years younger, looked just fucking like the bastard, right down to the yellow-orange citrine eyes and sharp jawline. There was no shortage of familiar resemblance there, so Dave had to admit it, even as loath to the idea he was. Bro was his father, even if Dave's unfortunate genetics spared him from looking like the man. He raised me, took care of me, even beat the shit out of me in between his constant murder sprees. Karkat didn't react that much to the bombshell, so Dave had to ask, "How much of that had you guessed?" "Most of it," Karkat admitted, fingers nervously clenching. His knuckles were pale. "The family part, at least, and the other stuff," he ended lamely. Dave raised an eyebrow at that, but didn't push his luck. Part of him didn't want Karkat to know he'd been a soundboard for creative, unique tortures, even though the proof of it was stamped all over his body. But then Karkat had to ruin it all. Did you know about the murders?" Karkat still wasn't looking at him. His eyes were resolutely fixed on his lap. "Karkat," Dave said, and Karkat still didn't look at him. "Karkat, look at me." At last, Karkat looked up, and Dave could read hope written there, see the false narrative Karkat had created in his mind, clinging to the scenario where Dave hadn't even known what was going on and had run to the police as soon as he found out. That was when Dave felt his heart break, because even now, Karkat thought he was a good person. "Karkat," Dave said again, and the other boy's lips were trembling as Dave held his gaze. "He made me help." Karkat's face fractured as he hissed in his breath, but he didn't fight it. He didn't argue. He just accepted it, and that part nearly hurt worse than knowing that Karkat knew the truth. For some reason, Dave kept talking, attempting to explain away a bit of his guilt. "Slick knows all the rotten details. He's still trying to build a case against Bro, even though the cops already have more than enough information to damn him forever, even without my help. Bro's still put there looking for me, as his most recent message and body confirms. He'll stop nothing until I'm dead for betraying him." "How did you betray him?" Karkat asked sadly, his voice a whisper. Dave shrugged. "I turned him in." "Why?" And there it was, the question that still haunted him. "Because he was going to kill me. Because he needed to be stopped. Because I want him dead. Take your pick, they're all fucking true." Suddenly, the whole story was spilling out of him. Maybe not all the grisly details, but the important parts for sure. The pictures, Bro's locked computer with all its unreachable answers, the Midnight Crew's stubborn, gruff determination, Dave's face plastered across the dark web for creeps to watch as his blood spilled, the room at the back of the apartment that always smelled too much like death and bleach, red dust caked on Bro's boots after he'd fucked off with the newest body, the ringing clash of swords and knives and unforgettable feelings of his bones splintering, Spade Slick's bull-headed insistence that Dave was a hero against all odds, that fateful graffiti message and the threat it represented, the timeline hanging above Dave's head, and his utter ineptitude when it came to fixing things before anyone else got hurt. He turned to face Karkat, still respecting the distance between them as the words poured out of him. "I ran less than a year ago, but that doesn't even matter because it still took too goddamn long for me to leave. And what did I even gain from it? A target on my back and more bodies to my name? The cops didn't even fucking catch him when I handed that fucker over to them on a silver platter. He still got away. He's still killing people. I'm still not free of him." Dave trailed off, his voice shaking. He couldn't help but curl on the soft couch, knees pressed against his chest in a bid to protect his abdomen. He'd done the right thing for the wrong reason, and the foul core of his hasty decisions was still biting him in the ass. He'd built up a life here on the crumbling foundation, and now the roof was caving in under the weight of what he'd done. "Dave, hey," Karkat said, drawing Dave back out of his head. "Don't think like that. That's how they win," he said, because somehow Karkat still didn't hate him after hearing all of that, and the knowledge was blocking out any other thoughts Dave might have, like a scratch on a record player. You don't hate me?" Dave asked, confused. Karkat didn't answer outright. He was still stuck on his previous statement. "You can't let yourself think like that." "I don't know how else to think," Dave admitted hoarsely. "It's like I'm stuck in some shitty Mobius ring of bad choices where everything's connected and always wraps around to get me in the end. Bro won't ever let me go. To him, I've done the unforgivable. He can't let me live. I know what it's like to be hunted, Karkat told him, grimacing, his fingers clenching against the knees of his jeans. I'm not like you, Dave, but I know I never made a bad decision. I know I didn't fuck up, but what's the use of clinging to fake innocence when the end result is the same? I still killed my classmates. I'm still guilty. I'm still being stalked by the wolf that did this to me. He trailed off, then looked right at Dave. I know what it's like to be hunted, to be haunted by the things you can't change. God damn. They were so alike. Sometimes Dave had to remind himself that Karkat was probably the only other person who understood what it's like to fight every damn day and still wake up with bloody hands. But how do you live with it? Dave asked miserably. How do you forgive yourself? Karkat patted the couch beside him. Come here. Dave didn't move, and Karkat rolled his eyes and huffed. You heard me. Get your ass over here, and I'll show you how. Driven by curiosity, Dave cautiously crept closer to closer until Karkat slumped towards him, and then suddenly they were side by side. Dave went very still at the contact, his heart pounding faster in his chest. Karkat was very warm at his side, thawing Dave's frozen skin. He had to hold back a shudder as Karkat drug a thick blanket off the back of the couch to drape over them, and when he touched Dave, it wasn't with any more hesitance than he'd shown in the past, the exact mixture of patience and want that broke right through all of Dave's walls. I know you've been hurt, Karkat began, and he reached for Dave's numb hands and grasped it tightly, watching how the scars shifted across his knuckles. And I know I can never understand what that was like for you. Fuck, I don't even know how to begin to approach knowing what to say or do or how to act. So I'll just keep being myself around you and praying that's enough. That I'm enough. Dave didn't even dare to fucking breathe. But I know this, Karkat said as he leaned closer, his head fitting itself on top of Dave's shoulder like it was made for it. I know I can never hate you, Dave. And I know that you don't deserve to be hated. I know that you don't deserve any of the bullshit you're going through, and I know it's a goddamn miracle that you're even fucking alive right now. And I am so, so happy that I got a chance to meet you. So this is how to forgive yourself, Karkat said, clutching Dave's hand, his words ghosting themselves across Dave's skin, and he was as mad as Dave was numb. This is how you start. This right here. You accept that some things are out of your reach and that you did the absolute best you could, and in the end, you say fuck it and fuck you and decide that you deserve to be happy. Because when the universe hands you shit, you've got to stand up and say, this is my fucking life now, and it's the only one I'm getting, and I'll be damned if I let someone else or something else ruin it for me. You've got to start living for you. That's how you start to forgive yourself. In a series of little steps that makes it easier to go on. You accept the past and learn from it. You never repeat it. And you force the future to bend to your will because you refuse to accept it any other way. But first, you start by being happy because that's the single biggest fuck you that you can give to bro. Dave didn't even think he remembered how to breathe. How could he be happy? Was that even possible? Did he deserve it? Before he could second-guess himself, Dave raised their interlinked fingers to his face and pressed his lips against the back of Karkat's hand and held it there. Karkat shifted against him, picking his head up from Dave's shoulders to look at him across the scarce few inches that separated them. 1,000 unsaid words cluttered the air between them, burning white-hot as Dave stared into Karkat's face. Those beautiful red eyes considered him. Pupils dilated as Karkat's hand moved to hold his jaw, fingers splayed against his skin. Fuck it, Karkat said angrily, and then they were kissing. Everything inside of Dave melted at once, molding himself to Karkat's lips as his breath left him in a gasp. He mirrored Karkat, one hand gripping his jaw, the other laying open against Karkat's chest to feel his heart beating strongly beneath his palm. His actions caught up to him a second later. Shit, Dave panted, leaning away. His voice was shaking. Holy shit, Karkat, Do you want me to stop? Karkat asked, and his eyes were absolutely smoldering. God, no, Dave said, and he kissed Karkat again, as his friend smiled against his lips and drug his fingers through the short hair on Dave's head, every move deliciously warm and slow. You, Karkat interrupted, still kissing him. You said that you loved me. I did, Dave said, or Dave didn't even hesitate to admit it. I don't regret it either. When did you know? Karkat asked, pulling him back to gaze at him. Dave spoke from the heart. That night I stayed over during the full moon, after you changed back. I was suspicious when you asked me to stay with you, and I knew I shouldn't, but I wasn't strong enough to leave you then. We fell asleep on the couch together, and I remember waking up sometime during the night in your arms, and that was the first time I'd ever felt safe. The memory jumped unbidden to his mind, the sleepy weight of his head pillowed on Karkat's chest, listening to the gentle sound of his breathing. That's when I knew. That's the instant I knew I loved you, and that knowledge has been haunting me ever since. To Dave's surprise, Karkat let out a short, breathless laugh. Holy shit, he said, incredulous. I remember that. I remember begging you to stay with me. And I did, Dave said, and he wrapped his arms around Karkat just to hold him. You did, Karkat agreed, his fingers meeting behind Dave's neck. They were wound around each other now, sharing space. That's when I knew I loved you. That's when I knew I could trust you completely, that I'd never scare you away. That's when I let myself love you, because I knew you'd be there for me no matter what. Dave dropped his head down, shoulders shaking, Karkat's words boring into him with unbearable sweetness. Hey, Karkat said, prompting Dave to meet his suddenly shy gaze. It'll be okay. We'll be okay. We'll be okay, Dave repeated, and for the first time in his life, he believed it. And he spent the rest of the time Slick had given him with Karkat on the couch as the almost full moon rose outside, the words, "We'll be okay, we'll be okay," playing on repeat in his mind, trading gentle kisses and pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. Oh, I love them so much. I love them so much. Oh. Oh, I love this chapter. Oh my god, the healing. The healing? Oh, they're so... I love them. I love them. Is your voice okay? That's my voice cracking up a storm. It cracks when I get excited. They're so in love and it makes me so happy. What? Oh my god. Oh my god, next chapter. Oh my god, chapter 18. Surely, okay. Surely nothing goes wrong. Surely nothing goes wrong. We've got 10 chapters left. Surely nothing else happens. It's just happy, fun, kissing, cute stuff for the rest of the we just get like another, like, what, 70k words of fluff? Surely, right? They just made up everything is good now. It's true. That's it. Okay, chapter 18. Wow, that was such a sweet chapter. Surely the next one is nice too. Absolutely. That's all this is gonna be, right? Surely. Okay. Chapter 18. Somehow, it was Monday. Time was funny like that. The next day always came regardless, marching on and on, no matter what Dave did. It was like he was trapped in an hourglass that had already run out, his feet in the sand, empty space above his head, unsure of what he was even trying to count down to. The full moon was also tonight, which meant Karkat wasn't in school today. Without Karkat there and a timeline hanging over Dave's head, he wondered why school was still a thing anyway. He guessed that sometimes he learned stuff, but was a handful of spare tidbits really worth time that he could have been spent at the safe house trying to track down Bro's next victim? According to Slick, yes, but Slick had different motivation that bordered simply keeping Dave out of the house for a few hours and forcing him to have normal human interactions. The overprotective, worrisome asshole Dave almost wished he could make this easier on the guy, but he didn't know how. He still didn't know how to make the murders go away. He didn't know how to stop Bro. He still couldn't wash the blood off his hands. But he could pass advanced algebra, so maybe he wasn't completely useless. Maybe Slick was on to something after all. School passed quickly until lunch, where Dave sat alone in the front office beside Carcat's conspicuously empty seat. His food was tasteless on his tongue. Officer Johnson tried to talk to him, small talk, camaraderie, shooting the shit, but the guy had no idea what was happening and was under the impression that nothing at all had changed in the past few weeks. It just made Dave more aware of the fact that he was ever increasingly living in a world no one else could ever be a part of. The empty seat at his side burned, the one exception to that rule absent due to foreseen and unavoidable circumstances. Dave could no more stop the full moon from rising than he could find out where Bro was hiding. He was getting sick of working within the rules invented by someone else. It was after school when he received the text. The number was unfamiliar. The sun had finished setting over an hour ago, and Slick was moping about in the overgrown garden somewhere with a flashlight, cursing about blocked lines of vision and unreliable surveillance tech. Dave stared at the text with trepidation. It was vague enough to have been from a wrong number, but his name stood out like some damning banner. Dave. I hope you know that I'm not texting you too late, or I hope that I'm not texting you too late at night, but I'm currently working under some very peculiar orders. Whoever this was, it certainly wasn't Bro. The wording was all wrong, too few taunting threats of death and dismemberment, but it could have been from someone working for him. Dave considered calling Slick back from outside, tinkering, but decided to do a little investigating on his own first. Whose orders? The answer came immediately. Carcat's. That didn't really clear things up, but it did make him curious and cautious. With the moon hanging heavy in the sky, overripe and bloated as a blind eyeball, Carcat was locked in the basement of his extremely fortified house and unable to text anyone. Carcat currently couldn't give anyone orders, but if Bro knew enough about Dave's life here to know and bait him with Carcat's name, then he'd already lost. There was a thing with cell phones, right? A tracking thing? Stay on the line for more than 30 seconds and they had you? Was there something similar for texts? Who is this? He texted them back because his dumbassery was alive and well. He had enough things to fear without adding unknown texters to the list. Oh, this is Carcat's dad speaking. I didn't realize you didn't have my number. Dave squinted at his phone. The answer seemed too convenient to be real. Prove it. Really? Prove it's me? Doesn't that seem a little extreme to you, not to mention unnecessary? Don't avoid the fucking question. Blocking in 10, 9, 8, 7, 5. You skipped 6. Fuck you. 3. Alright. I knew you could be paranoid, but I had no idea it was this pronounced. When I came back from California, I walked in on you and Carcat tangled together on the couch in the living room. My son was still passed out from his transformation, but you were awake. I still haven't brought up that incident with Carcat because I didn't want to embarrass you. I'm not sure how much of that night he remembers, but I'll never forget the sight of you two together. It gave me hope that maybe things would be for the better. It was a scene only Carcat's dad would know, but that didn't make Dave feel any better about having this conversation. Why would Mr. Vantis be contacting him? What orders? Okay, I'll bite. It's you. Respectfully, why the fuck are you texting me? Is something wrong with Carcat? Not at all. He just wanted me to remind you not to freak out during his absence. That's weird. Why'd he think I would freak out? It's not like the full moon snuck up on me or anything. It's kind of on a schedule and everything. Last thing we need is the lunar cycle going off the shits. Full moon rising without any sense of waning, or like 5 times a fucking week, and then it up and vanishes for the rest of the month, like some kind of spree flasher getting their fix and then dodging before the cops could catch on. Oh my god, the moon really is a flasher. We just don't notice because it's stripping so slowly as the night passes by until its whole ass is bared to the entire goddamn world. I've cracked the code. Wake up, America. The moon's a fucking stripper. What in the goddamn hell are you talking about? The moon's a stripper. Didn't I make that stellar observation obvious? I'm not having this conversation with you. I've said my part and I'll be off now. Good night, Dave. Wait, hold on. In the spirit of not shitting with you, can I ask an honest-to-God question real quick? The way you phrase that question makes me worried about what you're going to tell me. Can I opt out of this? No. We're in the shit now. You and me are the only people in the world who have realized the whole truth about the moon turning tricks once a month to pay rent. This makes us closer than brothers, blood brothers even. Together, we must spread the truth. Good night. Okay, I'll stop. I actually did have a question hiding underneath all that bullshit I just typed up, and if you'd let me carry that long-winded metaphor out to its natural conclusion, the topic at hand would have eventually risen to the top like the cream and milk between vivid imagery of the moon and lingerie and allegories about the working class. You've got to learn how to go with the fucking flow, dude. Do you speak to my son like this? Oh no, never. With him it's much worse. I can't imagine. What's your question? How much do you know about what's going on? There was a long pause between the responses. Dave stared at the screen the entire time, squinting against the glare. When the answer came, it was lackluster. With you, I assume. Sure. Another long pause. Dave was starting to feel nervous. Before Carcat met you, I was certain that I knew everything about him. He only started keeping secrets when he began hanging out around you, and I'm certain he's hiding things to protect you. I know you're with witness protection. I know you come from a dark place. But I also know that my son trusts you enough to keep the dirty details out of my sight, so whatever it is that's going on with you, I don't really want to know. Keep your secrets, Dave. I won't pry. It's not my business to poke around, and I do actually trust my son enough to let him make his own decisions about you because I can't help but trust you as well. You trust me? Why? It was such an odd thought. Someone else trusting him enough to not want to scrape clean the inside of his skull and ponder over whatever skim they've collected. Slick was alright most of the time, and he was getting better, but the Fed still looked at Dave sometimes like Dave was a puzzle to pull apart and dissect until the right answers presented themselves, like Dave was a riddle he couldn't quite solve. Dave, you saved my son's life, at great danger to your own, I might add. Whatever else is going on with you, whatever is happening that you're so worried about me knowing, it won't erase the fact that you've saved Carcat. You've got a good heart, Dave. Carcat sees it, and I do too. So yes, I trust you. And if you ever make me regret that trust, let's just say that I know a lot of good places to hide a body. Oh, wow, is this the shovel talk you're giving me right now, or just an average everyday death threat? One of the things about you that Carcat didn't keep a secret is the fact that the two of you spend hours making out on my living room couch. I'll strive to keep a closer eye on the pair of you in the future. I guess I can't leave you two alone unsupervised anymore. Wait, let me guess. Don't break his heart or I'll kill you, right? Am I getting warmer at least? God damn, the anticipation keeps building. I just don't want Carcat to get hurt. He's been through too much to deserve that. I'm just asking you to treat him well. Or I'll get the shovel. Oh my god, thank you so much. This is perfect. An honest-to-God shovel talk. Another cultural milestone to mark off my list. You are so fucking weird. I can see why my son likes you so much. Thank you, Carcat's dad. That's the nicest death threat I've ever received. I'll fucking cherish that shit forever. Alright, have a nice night, Dave. Okay, but can you do me one more favor first? What? Forget this number. No one else is supposed to have it, and it's dangerous for you to know. Plus, Slick will flip his shit if he finds out you got a hold of it. Will do. There were no further texts that night or the night after. With the full moon still in the sky and Carcat missing, Dave realized just how fucking often he relied on his limited texting to pass time. It was official. Full moon sucked ass. He was saying that a lot now, but that didn't make the phrase any less true. It was towards the end of the full moon period that Dave began to stream long paragraphs to Carcat's phone for him to see when he finally turned back. Most of what he sent was utter bullshit. Some of them were song lyrics, some of them were homework answers, all of them contained an undercurrent of pure longing that he wasn't sure he wanted to edit out. He'd grown okay with the idea of being seen, being known, by Carcat. Outside, night had fallen, the weakening moon still showering its pale light across the wooden floor through the slats in the window blinds. There was dust on the floor. Dave needed to sweep or something soon. Wash his sheets, Windex the spotted window, anything to help claim this space as his, as inhabited, the corner points of the small room bounding the limits of his own sanctuary. He just managed to strip his bed down to the bare mattress when his empty phone finally vibrated with the first text message he'd received in days. Dave all but threw himself at his cell phone, wrestling it free from the mess of tangled blankets and bedding it had fallen into. He flipped the phone open and thumbed through his recent texts. The bad news is that it wasn't from Carcat. The worst news was that it wasn't from Mr. Mantis either. It was from Slick. Dave clicked open the text without bothering to think about it too much. If the contents of the text were worthy of his worry, he'd find out soon. No sense in struggling over something that might not be a federal fucking issue for once. Dave, could you come into the kitchen for a moment? Dave stared at the text. Outside, he heard the telltale crunch of tires on the gravel driveway, even though it was nearly 10 at night. The unseen car engines revved loudly right before the cutoff, which meant that Boxcar was driving. The midnight crew had no business at the safe house at this time of night, not unless something had happened. Dave texted Slick back. What the fuck happened? What makes you think something happened? The rest of your crew just pulled up outside at 10 at night on a fucking Wednesday, so don't bullshit me. What the fuck happened? Dave, I really think you should come into the kitchen now. Dave frowned at his phone, nerves squirming to anxious life in his belly. He followed through with making his way into the kitchen on instinct, not really thinking about it. He was still wearing his old jeans, but for once his shirt was loose-fitting and short-sleeved, revealing just how fucked up his arms were. The midnight crew was waiting for him in the kitchen. Slick's face was worried, but not scared, and Dave couldn't see any damning manila envelopes ready to get sprung on him. Clubs didn't even have his laptop out. What was going on? Dave, Slick asked, you okay? Dave nodded on automatic and crossed his arms over his chest, not caring that the move telegraphed how defensive he felt. What happened? This time, Slick didn't bullshit him. The Fed simply opened his laptop and began to boot it up. I know this is a lot to ask of you, he said, seriously, but do you think that you could give us a hand with a little virtual hunting? This was so far out of line of anything Dave had been dreading that it caught him off guard, but he was still quick on the uptake. Who are you hunting? Clubs, Slick grunted, and the tiny man had launched into a speech about different techniques they'd used to try and track down Bro, and how each one had failed. So, Club Deuce started, the idea is to try and find Bro by finding out who all is part of his inner circle. Bro didn't act in a vacuum. He had people out there supporting him and paying his bills. They're every bit as guilty as he is, and if we find out who these creeps are, we might be able to find out the who, where, and how that Strider has managed to evade us successfully for so long. Deuce shot a clean look at Dave, stewing over his next words, fingernails tapping against his legs like he was typing at an invisible keyboard. You see, Dave, serial killers across the board tend to act in predictable ways. They have patterns, tells, tiny clues that they leave behind that psychologists everywhere froth the bit to get a hold of. Your Bro is not like that. I know, Dave said. None of this was a surprise to him. Bro wasn't some cookie-cutter psychopath. He followed no mold but his own. Deuce continued. Other killers, even the great ones, they all make mistakes because they're mostly driven by their violent passions. They slip up, get sloppy, and that's why we catch them. Bro's not driven by any violent passion, Dave scoffed. Thinking like that is utterly delusional. Why? Deuce questioned. Because he's so calculating, so careful, so callous and cold. Because he's crafty, clever, crooked, and whatever other descriptive C words the thesaurus can vomit up about him. Conniving, capricious, cruel, creator of cold cases, take your fucking pick. I could tell you he's creepy, confident, combatant, clinical, cryptic, and extremely comprehensive. I could tell you anything that's true, but how does this trading of words help us stop him? Have you ever hunted rabbits before? Deuce asked, completely derailing Dave's train of thought. Dave shook his head. He'd been raised in a city apartment building. He wasn't even sure if he'd ever seen a real rabbit before, and absolutely zero part of him was interested in hunting something for sport. Rabbits are wily creatures, Deuce told him. To catch one unaware is impossible. So from the start, the rabbit knows it's being hunted, and it goes to the ground. To catch one, you have to start by blocking off its bolt holes. You remove all the places it can hide, trap it above ground with nowhere to go. That's what we need to do with Strider. Take away all of his hidey holes, all of his dark web buddies that might be helping him hide. Oh, we trap the bastard above ground. Dave just stared at the man. Droog spoke up. We've asked enough questions about Bro, he said. Now tell us about his friends. Dave swallowed thickly. I don't know much about them, he admitted. Bro never let me poke around his systems much. but there is one guy that might have a hand in this mess. I don't know his real name, but on mine he went by Little Cal, except when they spoke, Broke called the bastard Caliborn. Deuce was attentively writing all this down on a yellow notepad in some impenetrable script that wasn't English. Code, maybe? Dave went on. This fucker was like Bro's best buddy. They talked a lot, mostly about the job, but also other stuff. Other stuff? Slick asked, one scarred eyebrow raised. Dave nodded. They both hate football. It was a popular topic with them. Anything you can tell us about this guy? Dave said, thinking back to muffled conversations he could barely make out. Caliborn hates women and homosexuals, and he's a racist son of a bitch. Basically, his personality is what happens when someone personifies a raging dumpster fire. Anything else? Slick asked. Dave nodded, his neck stiff. His shoulders were tight. When he spoke, his voice was small. He's killed people. Deuce's pen didn't stop its rapid scribbling, the nib scratching at the thick paper. Who? Slick asked, oddly gentle. Dave shrugged helplessly. Prostitutes, mostly, he said. He bragged about it to Bro afterwards. I don't know what city or even country he's in, though, so I don't know how much I can help you. I don't even know where he lives. Anything in specific? Slick asked. Any single detail you remember that might help us ID the guy? He likes the redheads the best, Dave said miserably. And whoever he is, he's rich as fuck, that's all I know. Would this be someone listed under Bro's contacts? Slick asked curiously. Be on his computer for sure. They talked all the time. Glove Deuce pursed his lips in thought, then sighed. As soon as we break into that damn laptop, we'll have the bastard, he swore. I almost wish Tech would let me take a crack at it. Dave spoke without thinking. I could try. He choked off the sentence, stopped, took a deep breath, did not allow his mind to go down that particular road. His hands were shaking. Slick was watching him closely. His dark eyes glittered. Kid, he trailed off, but he didn't need to say any more than that. Dave's mind was racing. Could he do this? Was it possible? He tried to speak, but his tongue was glued to the roof of his mouth. His spit tasted dangerously acidic as his stomach heaved. Dave barely choked it back in time, nearly gagging as he resolved to never speak of this again. It was too late, though. Slick had seen Dave's reaction. He knew that there was something there worth following, but this time he didn't push for more. For that, Dave was grateful. Thinking about Dirk for longer than a moment made him feel like he was sitting on the floor of his old apartment again, staring at the locked door, struggling to come to terms with the fact that it would never open again. That's all I know, he ended lamely. I'll tell you if I remember more. Slick was still staring at him, hawk-like. You should get some sleep, he said, dismissing Dave. I'll let you know if we find anything or need anything else. Dave nodded and drifted back to his room, where he drowned all of his thoughts in a hot shower and then stared at the stripped bed for a moment before shrugging a clean sheet onto the mattress and calling it a night. Like his overactive mind, that was one more thing that could wait until the morning. Then his phone vibrated again. This time, when Dave fished the device out of the pocket, he saw great text. I'm okay. Everything is fine over here. The full moon sucks, but that's no surprise. I'm reading over everything you sent me while I was out. Jesus. There's a lot to make my way through. How can you type so much? Sometimes I just feel like I have a lot to say. Is that right? Besides me, is there anyone else that you talk to like this? No, not really. And yet you're still so full of words. Quite the conundrum, isn't it? Are you really okay? Yeah, I'm just tired. I don't think I can stay awake for much longer. I just wanted to let you know that I'm alright. I'll be at school tomorrow. That's great. I missed you. You know, I don't really feel time passing as a wolf. It's all a blur anyway. I know that it's been a few days since we've seen each other, but it doesn't quite feel like that to me. Even so, yeah, I miss you too. Dave couldn't help but smile at his phone. God, we're a mess, the both of us. We're a mess. Both of us are messes, aren't we? So, who cares about any of that? I'm a fucking werewolf, and you're living under an alias and hiding from a serial killer. I think we both earned a little deviation from the norm. Yeah. I want to talk to you for the next 6 straight hours, but I know you need to sleep now. I do. Shit. It's getting harder to look at my phone. Go to sleep then, idiot. I'll be here for you in the morning. Promise? Barring all the unusual attacks of circumstance, I promise. Now, go the fuck to sleep. Ha, nice loophole you added there, Dave. Still, thank you. Night, car cat. Night, Dave. Dave put his phone back down. It didn't vibrate again. He looked at the face of the moon through the slats in his blinds, waned just enough to show a small sliver scraped from its surface. Just enough to break the monthly curse that stole Karkat away when the moon was at its fullest. There were still so many things they needed to talk about, but for now, with night creeping in through the window and sleep pulling at his eyelids, Dave set it aside like so much dirty laundry. Later. It would all happen later. But for tonight, his dreams went on unbroken. Oh boy, 18. Olivia, did you catch up to to where we're at right now? Fucking, I guess if you technically speed read, you could do it twice as fast as me reading it out loud. Oh my goodness. All right, chapter 19. I did chapter 18's contents have been eaten at full speed. Full speed. All right. Chapter 19. Dave considered himself a categorically stubborn person. Old habits died hard with him, which was why, even though months had passed since he'd been in his old apartment, he still woke up before Slick had ever touched his bedroom door. By the time the gentle knock had sounded, Dave was already awake and sitting upright. One of the upsides to this creaky old house was the loudness of the footsteps across the wooden floors. Dave knew where Slick was at all times, even when asleep. "Kid," Slick called out, and Dave could make out nothing amiss in his voice. "What?" Dave called back, shrugging on a fresh shirt from the clean pile of clothes on the floor he hadn't gotten to folding yet, slapping out the wrinkles. The door cracked open in a way that would have been ominous if Slick had wanted it to be, but then Dave caught sight of the Fed's deeply lined, worried face. The agent was getting better at being unreadable, but Dave could still make out most expressions he tried to hide. What happened? Slick didn't deny that something had happened. He merely reached up to scratch loudly at the scruff at his chin. "Has Karkat texted you this morning?" The unexpected direction of the question made Dave nervous. He didn't trust that this was a harmless conversation. It couldn't be, not with the degree of tension bleeding into the open air between them. Something not good had happened. "No, he hasn't," Dave answered blankly, mind racing to the list of awful possibilities as fast as he could. Slick nodded to himself, but the motion was cautious in a way that he moved when he was trying not to spook Dave into fight or flight. Dave revised his internal assessment of the growing situation. Something bad had happened. "What the fuck happened?" Dave asked, and Slick didn't try to bullshit him. Instead, he tried to break it gently. "This time," he said, "the body the cops found last night didn't belong to Bro. She wasn't his work." Floored and sickened, Dave blinked. "Whose then?" he asked, because if Slick was telling him this, then somehow it was connected to him. Somehow this was his fault. He reached for his shades and slid them on. "We don't know," Slick admitted, and for a second Dave was confused, and then the Fed continued. "We still don't have the bastard's name, but Jesus, Dave, the poor girl died from a werewolf attack. We think it's the wolf that turned Karkat." The room rocked around him. Outside, the sky began to show the rosy signs of morning. The alarm of his phone began to go off, waking him for the school day that he suddenly wasn't sure he was going to get. He switched off the beeping noise and sat in silence for a moment. Fuck. Fuck is right, Slick sighed, scuffing the worn floor with the toe of his shoe. "A goddamn mess is what it is. I'm getting sick of clubs texting me pics of dead bodies." He frowned at the floor. "They're pulling Karkat out and driving him to the scene so we can possibly identify if it was the wolf who turned him, or if there's some other lone wolf wandering around the country that just had an unlucky night." "Is that really the best the cops can do?" Dave asked, worried. The last thing he wanted was Karkat at a crime scene that had a body on the ground. Karkat had enough trauma as it was without piling more on top of him. But then the next thought struck him. He sat up straighter. "They're driving him? How close was the attack?" "It was in Fort Dodge, about 2.5 hours away," Slick told him. "Look, Dave, I wish as much as you do that we could keep Karkat away from this, but right now his nose is the only chance we have at catching a positive identity from this wolf. That was way too close for comfort, especially considering the fact that the wolf had tried to murder Karkat at school not that long ago. He blinked, trying to make the pieces fit. I thought that after Karkat's attack, his dad moved him from Seattle way here to fuck offsville, Iowa, because it was supposed to be far away enough to make it safe for him. There can't be that many goddamn rogue wolves running around fucking Iowa. I know, Dave, Slick said, frustrated. We already know it was him, but legally we still need Karkat to identify him. Will sense even excuse me. Will sense even hold up in court? Dave asked dryly, picking at his comforter. What's the legality of a werewolf's nose to the system anyway? It's inadmissible evidence, Slick answered, sounding strained. I just thought you should know so that you can keep Karkat calm today. I'll text him nonstop, Dave swore. Not with school you won't, Slick grunted. Dave shrugged. So I'll skip it. You'd fucking better, the Fed growled, because I'm sending you with him. For a second, it was like the room spun again. Dave wasn't sure if he'd heard right, except that he objectively understood the words that had left Slick's mouth, but the content was so off-field that there had to be some mistake. What? You heard me, Slick grunted. I'm sending you with him. It's a long drive, and I thought it'd be best if you had some company. But, Slick warned, you aren't off the hook. This isn't your case to work, and it's an active crime scene, so you'll stay your bony ass in the fucking car. Understood? Fine, Dave agreed, still shocked. No part of him wanted to see another dead body ever again, so he'd be more than happy to stay in the car. He'd seen enough blood to last a lifetime. Good, Slick said. I'm driving us over there soon, so best get ready with haste. With haste? Dave joked to ease the terrible atmosphere. What the fuck's wrong with quickly? Get ready quickly. It was that easy, man. With haste, my ass. Sounds like some kind of 20s noir mobster bullshit. Slick rolled his eyes, pleased that Dave was obviously trying to lighten the mood. Just fucking be there, you hear? Loud and clear, Dave said, and Slick closed the door. Dave all but jumped out of the bed. He didn't text Karkat. He figured he'd seen him soon enough anyway. He didn't want to interrupt whatever talk was surely going on in the Vantas house. He did not envy that fly on the wall. He brushed his teeth, ran his fingers through his hair, didn't think about what would surely happen today, tied his beat-up old sneakers onto his feet, and realized for the 100th time that he probably needed a new pair. Dave wasn't much of a breakfast eater, but Slick still met him at the door with a granola bar and a bottle of water. Damn, Dave teased. Look, you being all domestic and shit. Slick wasn't impressed as he straightened his eye patch, dressed in a black suit that didn't try to hide the ever-present gun at his hip. Just get in the damn car. Dave shut up and accepted the food and water, which he stashed in his empty backpack for later. The sun was barely in the sky when they left, the horizon painted pink and blushing with the promise of new light. There were still stars. In the west, the newly waned moon hung bloated and shrinking, a fragment of it still visible above the tree line. On a normal day after the full moon, Karkat should be at home sleeping off the manic rush of being turned. Instead, Dave was on his way to pick him up to see a dead body. Life was fucked sometimes. The drive was short. They stopped uptown in the McDonald's parking lot to switch cars for an equally black four-door driven by a solemn boxcar, who took Slick's car and sped it out of the parking lot rough enough that Slick winced at the sound of his tires screeching against the asphalt as his car barreled out of sight. If that fucker so much as scratches my goddamn car, Slick muttered to himself just loud enough for Dave to hear. He didn't finish his threat, and Dave didn't ask him to, silent in the back seat, though some kind of plexiglass barrier that divided the front from the back, which was weird, because Dave thought only cop cars had shit like this in them, and not even an undercover cop car looked quite this expensive. There was a small sliding square in the middle of the shield, currently open, and the sound of radio static crackled through. Then they were at Karkat's house all too quick. Mr. Vantas was waiting outside on the porch, his arms crossed across his broad chest. Stay here, Slick instructed, and he left Dave in the running car. He could see the Fed talking to Karkat's dad, but he couldn't make out any of the words. He knew the Fed was angry, though. Karkat's dad just seemed sad. The front door opened, and Karkat stepped out. He was dressed in an oversized gray hoodie that swallowed him whole. The hood was even up, though it was sweltering outside with the early hour. Dave couldn't read Carcat's expression. He gave a half-hearted wave from the car anyway, not sure if Carcat could see him through the tinted windows. Gradually, the two adults separated, and at last, Carcat headed over to the car. Slick followed on his heels, the side door opening, and Carcat slid in, boneless and huffing. Slick reclaimed the driver's seat, and within a second, the car was speeding off again, out of the cul-de-sac and towards the highway. Carcat didn't say anything, but Dave didn't have to be sitting close to him to make out the heavy black bags pressed into his skin below his bloodshot red eyes. Shit, how much sleep had he even managed to get last night? 4 hours? Less? Are you okay? Dave asked, concerned. No, Carcat deadpanned. That's fair, Dave said, picking at the fabric with his bitten-down nails. Today sucks. Carcat looked at him then, searchingly, like he was trying to dissect some hidden meaning in Dave's words. Yeah, he admitted at last. Today does suck. He didn't say anything else. Dave watched the houses drift past the car windows until the buildings were swallowed by cornfields and soybean plots. It was amazing how fast urban areas vanished in the Midwest, giving way to nothing but farmland for mile after rolling mile. The only sound was the soft funk of something jazzy through the radio, and the occasional clunk of the car hitting a plot hole. It didn't take long for Dave to catch Carcat's chin moving towards his chest, eyes blinking to fight off sleep that Dave knew he needed. Dave shifted closer. The car was compact enough that it didn't take much to cross the few inches between them and offer his shoulder. Here, he said. You should get some sleep. Carcat hesitated, then looked grateful as he settled into place at Dave's side. Thanks, he said, yawning. Slick glanced at them through the divider. Do I need to enforce a 6-inch minimum distance between the two of you? Dave flicked him off, and the Fed laughed, but left them alone after that. Carcat made himself comfortable against Dave, his head pillowed on his shoulder. It didn't take more than a few minutes for Carcat to fall into some much-needed sleep. Dave tried to let the warmth of Carcat at his side and the gentle rolling of the car lull him likewise into rest, but he never felt more wide awake. It was the car, probably. Before meeting Slick, Dave could have counted all the times he'd ridden in a car on his hands, and the jolting motion, the feeling of the ground racing by. It all made sleep impossibly far away. He looked out the window mostly, but there were only so many farmhouses with floral patterns painted on the side of old wooden barns interspersed between the corn. So much goddamn corn. How could America eat this much fucking corn? Of course, it could have been something entirely different than corn, but Dave's limited crop knowledge classified anything tall, green, and leafy automatically as corn. And the other green things were soybeans, probably. That was it. Those were the only two crops he knew grew here this time of year due to information gleaned at school from the good old back road farm kids. And it grew boring, watching field after field of corn flash by. Plus, the arm Carcat was laying on felt dead and tingly. All in all, terrible road trip experience. Only Carcat's semi-unconscious presence made it slightly bearable. But the long drive evaporated all too quickly as the car ate up the pavement, and they were pulling off the exit into another small nowhere farm town. The water tower read Fort Dodge across it in big letters in the distance. Tense now, Dave let Carcat continue sleeping as Slick wove through the Warren-like roads. It was still early morning, and what few cars were on the roads were being funneled through a series of police barricades that had been hastily erected across the only exit that led to the highway, weeding out strangers in hopes of getting lucky enough to stumble across a killer. The cops weren't guarding the way in, though, and they let Slick's car pass unharassed. Do you think they'll find him? Dave asked as they drove past the final barrier. Slick shrugged as Carcat stirred against Dave's shoulder. The sun's up now, so we'll be up on 2 legs, not 4. That means he's probably got a car here somewhere, or a house, or some other bolt hole. If he's stupid or panicked, they might have a chance. Slick glanced behind him as the lone cop car peeled off the pack to tail them, lights off and sirens dead. The police radio crackled to life, codes Dave didn't understand rumbling forth. Slick answered back with ease, speaking quietly, and at the sound, Carcat finally succeeded in twitching himself back to wakefulness. He blinked blearily around the sun-bathed car, eyes squinting. Where are we? Oh, we're almost there, Slick answered softly, His knuckles were white against the steering wheel. Carcat's face paled. He looked slightly sick. "Oh," he said, dejected. "Hey," Dave said, gentle, squeezing his hand. "I'm here. Not, it'll be okay. Not, things will be fine. No lies like that. Just, I'm here. That would have to be enough." Carcat squeezed his hand back, his palm warm and the fingers tight. The car turned down a road, then another, until the pavement dissolved into old dust that billowed up in clouds around the car. Behind them, the police cruiser silently followed along. The road turned out to be a driveway, the letters PM painted in white on a winged mailbox. The red little mail flap thing was up, proof of a letter from a dead woman. The mailbox had a handprint painted lovingly onto the side of it. How quickly relics like these became something more than sentimental once the people who created them were gone. Dave looked away, biting his lips between his teeth. The house itself was an active crime scene, the driveway and yard choked with police, fire trucks, and an ambulance with the lights off. Slick parked the car in the grass and let the car idle. "Kid," he said, looking behind at Carcat, "you don't have to do this. You can still change your mind." Carcat looked sick and scared, but there was steel hiding behind his eyes. "I'll do it," he said. Dave felt a bit of pride at that, but Slick just looked sad. "All right," the Fed said, sighing. "Let's get this over with." "Dave?" "Yeah?" "Stay in the car. Don't talk to anyone. Don't even let anyone see you, okay?" Slick asked sternly. Dave wanted to joke, but the atmosphere was far too serious for that. A woman had died here, horrifically. Dave wondered how long it would take for the flowers in her window sills to shrivel and wither, then shook off the morbid thought. "Okay," he agreed. Carcat and Slick got out of the car. The policeman that had been following them immediately joined the mismatched pair, looking grave and exhausted as he led them around the house to the backyard, past where yellow tape had been strung up across the hedges. They vanished from sight. Dave felt a pang in his chest, sharp enough to burn. He wished this was something he could have spared Carcat from. He'd seen plenty of dismembered, tortured bodies before. One more wasn't about to break him. Even one wolf killed. But Carcat? Death had such a strong smell to it. Part blood and viscera, but there was a note of something deeper as well. Some hind-brained instinct to cower down when faced with human morality. The soul itself crushed down to nothing in a body that could no longer sustain it. It was bad enough to smell death as a human. How much stronger was the scent to a werewolf? The question here wasn't about this fucked up situation causing Carcat mental pain. It was about how much. Dave hissed in his breath, his chest hurting. This was going to suck. Just the impending knowledge of the murder was pressing in on him, and he was in his apartment again, all alone, with blood on his knees as he scrubbed at the floor, bleach burning in his nostrils to mask the scent of blood and piss, his ribs aching from the latest beating, listening to Bro move around the apartment and wincing every time he took a step in the direction of the back room. He got so tied up in his own goddamn head. The time lost meaning to him, so he didn't know how long it took for Carcat to suddenly reappear, until the side door yanked itself open and Dave startled to life so hard that his fists came up on reflex. Carcat stood there, tears streaming down his face as he sniffled miserably. He still hesitated when he saw Dave jump to the defensive. "It's okay," he said. "It's just me." Dave couldn't have felt more like shit. "It's cool," he said, the words meaningless. "I'm okay." He forced his hands to lower. "You?" Carcat wiped at his eyes with his sleeve. He stammered, then shook his head as his throat closed up. Salt water welled up in his eyes again as his face twisted into pure grief. "Come here," Dave said at once, scooting over to allow Carcat the room to slide in beside him. Carcat instantly curled into him, clutching with both his hands, taking these awful, gasping, shuddering breaths. Dave barely noticed Slick silently getting into the driver's seat. His attention was only for Carcat. "Hey," he said desperately, low and soothing. "You're okay. You'll be okay." His hands were tangled in Carcat's hair, holding him close. "What do you need?" Whatever the answer was, Dave would do it. Carcat hiccuped back a sob. "It was him," he said, burying his face into Dave's shirt. "It was him. He killed the mail lady." By this point, Dave wasn't surprised. Slick's overwrought face had told him everything he needed to know. I can't get his fucking smell out of my nose, Karkat wheezed, still crying. I'm here, Dave said, the words flowing out of him. Shh, I'm here. He strained his mind to try and remember what Dirk had always said to him to calm him down or cheer him up. But Dirk had never really used his words. He'd been all action, deflection and distraction, anything to take Dave's mind off of whatever horror had surely just happened. But Dave couldn't be like that. All he had were words, so he sought to use them well. You know, he said softly, Slick would flip his shit if he heard me say this, but fuck it. After that, Dave was certain that the Fed was now listening intently, but the opening broke through Karkat, and he showed a bit of interest. What? Karkat asked, confused. It wasn't always bad, growing up, Dave said, seeking to distract him with one of the few stories he could tell that were categorically not terrible. Bro was a rotten bastard to the core, but every few months he'd show me a kindness. I remember once he ordered this new game in the mail, and he was actually really fucking excited when it came in. It was some absolute piece of shit skateboarding JPEG monstrosity, like -5 stars and all that shit, probably produced by some college hackers trying to create a game while high out of their minds. But that was exactly the appeal of such a piece of shit. There was no goal, no winning, just endless shitting around online trying to find new and creative ways to break the buggy game, and even more through glitches. And even better was multiplayer. Dave knew he had the attention of every person in the car, and Karkat's sobs had slowed, losing force. So this one time, he let me play with him. I was his player too, and we spent the afternoon in some kind of truce, just shitting around together as my clumsy ass wiped out doing sick flips off of shitty game sidewalks. It was fun, you know? There was gentle teasing back and forth, ribbon, fucking everything. I even remember him laughing as I wiped out for like the 100th time. And after that, I gave up trying to be good at the game and started seeking out ways to wreck myself hilariously, just to see if I could get him to laugh again. I think that's one of the best memories I have. Us wasting the day on a shitty skating game, just as bros. He left out all the bad shit that was wound up inside that memory, shoved everything else away because this was about Karkat now, not him. That wasn't the only time either. That shitty game became some kind of tradition for us. I always looked forward to it. He let fondness color his tone, not for bro, but for that shitty game that had probably saved his ass a few times, because when playing it, Dave was sure that in that moment, as long as he had the controller in his hands, he was safe. Why? Karkat asked, intrigued despite himself. How could a monster like that be nice sometimes? Dave knew the answer. There had been studies done on dogs before, and the ones that were beaten and shown occasional kindness were twice as loyal, twice as obedient, than the ones that had been only beaten, because once shown a kindness, they'd do anything to receive it again. Just another bro's mind games, but one that hurt less in the moment. But that wasn't all of the truth, so Dave spoke it. I don't know, he answered. I guess there were parts of him that weren't fucked beyond repair. Even monsters are a little human at times. I'm not sure I believe that, Karkat forced out, his voice hoarse. No one can act both monstrous and kind at once. Dave held Karkat closer. He knew what he believed. I think that people are complex individuals, he said. I think they're capable of anything they want, the good and the bad, and at times, both. Even killers? Karkat asked, and there was a growl buried in his tone, some deep-seated wolf thing that made the hairs on the back of Dave's neck raise. Yeah, Dave said, but you've got to understand something. The good does not make up for the bad. It never does. It's not some fucking balance system. There are sins so atrocious that no amount of good can cover them up, sins there's no return from. I think you're talking about yourself again, Karkat told him, scolding. Dave, you didn't do anything wrong. For once, I'm not talking about myself, Dave corrected him gently. I'm talking about monsters. Slick started the car. The engine rumbled beneath them. Karkat shivered with a shudder that went through his whole body, but when it had passed, he seemed calmer, like a cloud had lifted. Dave was still running his fingers slowly through Karkat's wild hair, the other arm wrapped around his shoulders as the car started forward. She fought back, Karkat whispered to him. It was his blood on the ground, too. She dived bravely. Dave didn't say anything, just kept holding Karkat until the sobs died down to nothing, and the cornfield swallowed up the small town that was struggling to piece together a killer's intent. There wasn't any talking as they returned to the highway and headed back. The long drive was completely silent, and Karkat stayed wound up around Dave the entire time. It wasn't until they reached the home city's limits that the police radio crackled to life again. Boxcar's gravelly voice reverberating through the car. Slick picked up the handheld receiver and spoke into it. Hearts, if you wrecked my car, you piece of shit, I'll... What came through next was unintelligible to Dave. Spades, 2 doves down at 3.14. Clubs is en route. Initiate go to ground protocol. The sound of Slick's cursing filled the air. The engine whined as he stepped on the gas. I gotta drop the kids off first, he explained, complaining. The needle inched past 75 on the speedometer. God damn it, Spades, Boxcar growled out. Understood. Then the radio cut out. Dave voiced. What the hell? Not now, Dave, Slick said, taking a way too fast turn. I'll explain later. The agent only slowed down once they reached the neighborhoods, forced to comply with road laws with civilians around. They reached Karkat's house all too fast. Slick pressed the car to idle and turned back to them with a glance. He took in the tangled together state of them, his expression unreadable. Karkat, he said. You did good today. You didn't have to, but you did, and that counts for us a lot. We're one step closer to stopping him. Are you sure? Karkat asked, and Slick didn't flinch. He can't hide forever, Slick swore, and even now we're tightening the net. He can't hide after a mistake like this. Was it a mistake? Karkat questioned. It happened last night. If he'd been running loose all full moon, far more would be dead. Somehow this was planned. It was a cold-blooded murder, even as a wolf. Somehow he planned this. But I don't know how. Slick nodded like the same realization had occurred to him. We know, he said. They're hunting for any connection between the mail carrier and the wolf now. Karkat nodded. Okay, he said, steeling himself. I did all I could. I just hope it's enough. Karkat, Slick said. It's always enough, he said, and then he opened the door. Karkat regretfully untangled himself from Dave's grip, lingering a bit too long before releasing his hold. He unbuckled his belt seat. Dave, thank you for everything. Dave nodded, and when Karkat leaned in one last time, Dave obediently captured his lips for a brief kiss, not caring if Slick was watching. When Karkat pulled back, Dave wanted to follow after him, but the dread was back, summoned by that mysterious radio call from Boxcars. Karkat walked over to his house and was greeted by his dad at the door, who immediately embraced him. Dave looked away as Slick put the car into motion again and sped off without a word. Slick, Dave had to try. What the fuck is happening? Wait till we get back to the safe house, the Fed advised. Club should be there waiting for us. It didn't take long for them to reach the safe house again. Slick's car was safely parked in the driveway, and Slick had to park the black four-door beside it in the grass. A motorcycle was pulled up next to the porch steps, and Club Deuce was waiting by the front door and pacing back and forth. Diamonds is on his way, Deuce said as soon as Dave and Slick turned the car off and got out. Shit's hit the fan in a bad way, boss. Slick held up a hand, stopping as he gave Dave a sharp glance. Let's get in the house first, he said. Slick unlocked the 3 locks and disarmed the alert system for them to enter, and they gathered at the kitchen table. A part of Dave wanted to retreat to his room, but he'd been going over the words Boxcar had used to puzzle meaning from them, and the conclusion he'd come to wasn't good. What's the damage? Slick asked seriously. Deuce pulled out his laptop and booted it up without a word. We're shielding it from the media now, he said. The story shouldn't break until at least tomorrow. Dave visibly winced when Deuce turned his laptop around to show them a screen. A dingy city overpass over railroad tracks, graffiti everywhere, a homeless encampment in the distance. The scene was lit up by police lights and fire trucks, illuminating the blood of the concrete and the pair of bodies that hung from the barbed wire strung around their throats, motionless in the air with their hands bound behind their backs. They'd been strung up as one, the wire leading upwards to the overpass overhead, the shadows ripped away by red and blue sirens. The blood looked black in the half-light, and Dave felt like he was going to throw up until he saw the orange behind them. "I'm getting closer, little bro," the message read. "Come out or I'll keep killing them." His stomach heaved, but there was nothing but bile to come up, and he hastily choked it back down. His hands gripped the wood table so hard he was afraid it'd break. Club scrolled to the next image, a close-up of both faces. "Do you know them?" Deuce asked softly. Dave peered at the faces. If he'd known them once, he couldn't tell now. Bro had taken great pains this time to hide their identities. They'd been mutilated. He shook his head, fighting back another wave of sickness. "I can't tell," he answered. Deuce looked unmoved. "That's okay," he said. "We'll get a positive ID soon." "Two?" Dave all but croaked out. "Why two this time?" he asked, but he already knew the answer. Slick sighed, pained before he answered. "Because Strider is trying to force our hand," he said. Dave had known all about the deadline hanging over his head, threatening him with more bodies if he didn't figure out how to stop it in time. But even he had never imagined Bro would go for two at once. He was certain when the IDs came back he'd recognize their faces, but a fruitless hunt through every Facebook profile of everyone in the city was a fool's endeavor. If he was going to stop this, he needed to do what Bro had done. Up the risk, step up the game, play for keeps. Dave said, paused, and took a deep breath as he evaluated the fatal weight of what he was about to do. "I think I can get into Bro's laptop," he said, and Club Deuce's mouth fell open. "But I'll need something first." "What do you need?" Slick asked at once, oddly excited. Deuce still looked stunned. How long had Slick suspected him? How long had he been willing to wait for Dave to try and do the right thing? Dave closed his eyes. "I need a yearbook from public school number 14, year 2010, 4th grade. Slick was already texting away, shooting the orders to whatever underling would fulfill them. It was up to Clubs to point out the obvious. "Dave, you weren't in 4th grade in 2010. You were in 1st grade then." "I know," Dave admitted, fingers tapping maniacally at the tabletop. "I need the book and Bro's laptop if I'm going to try and do this." "Dave," Slick began. "No," Dave cut him off, shaking his head. "That computer is the only way to stop him. We can't waste time crawling through fucking Facebook profiles, hoping for another goddamn miracle. We've got to stop him now before he strikes again, before he kills 3 people next time, before he knocks on the safe house door with a gun in his hand and kills us all." Abruptly, he was angry at himself for letting things go this far. Those 2 people's deaths were on his hands now, more bodies added to the record. Angry at Bro for doing this, for forcing his hand. Even angry at Dirk for not being here to tell Dave what he needed to do, for not fixing this when he'd had the chance all those years ago, and leaving Dave all alone to clean up the mess their family had made. "Book, laptop," Dave said. "I need them both as soon as possible." "The public library will have a copy of the yearbook. We can drive the computer today." Slick answered him. "They'll both be here by tonight. Boxcar will bring them up himself as he drives up tonight. It'll take a few hours, but we'll get it done." "Okay," Dave decided, and he sat down at the kitchen table and put his head in his hands. He didn't move for hours. He waited, his mind almost completely blank as he blocked out anything and everything that wasn't the memory of the tech that controlled Bro's apartment. Time passed at an imperceptible rate. Hours flashed by as minutes, as seconds ground by like weeks. The sun set after a sky painted the color of blood. His phone went off nonstop for hours, Carcat for sure, but for once Dave ignored them, focused inward as he tried to prepare himself for what he needed to do. If it were an emergency, Carcat would call him. Until that happened, Carcat could wait for a while. Darkness fell, then midnight passed. Sometime around that time, Diamond Drew arrived to lurk wordlessly in the corner. Sometimes the 3 agents spoke with lowered voices, but Dave didn't pay them any mind until around 2 a.m., when Boxcars at last called Slick's phone. "Boss," Boxcars said, his voice distant through the phone as Dave listened in from the table that had been the domain of his solitude for the past several hours. I'm just outside in town. I've got the book and the laptop with me. Good, Slick said gruffly. You'll be here soon, then? Yeah, Boxcar answered. Listen, boss. We might have a problem. What is it? Slick asked as Duke and Drew stepped in closer to hear. I've got a guy from tech driving, Boxcar said, his sounding highly strained. And, I've been looking through this book out of curiosity, you know? And I found Dave in first grade, looking all young and shit. Yes, and, Slick pressed, sounding annoyed. And Dave's not the only Strider in here, Boxcar stressed. There's another one. Looks just fucking like that bastard, bro. Right down to the unusual eye color. Silence. Complete, utter silence. No one said a word, and Dave could physically feel their gazes boring into him. He kept his head down, refusing to acknowledge them. All right, Slick said at last. His voice was deceptively even. Just get here soon, okay? Understood, Boxcar answered, and then he hung up the phone. Dave heard movement, but kept his eyes screwed tightly closed. Don't touch me, he barked out when he felt someone, probably Slick, at his side. He hadn't felt this kind of tension in him since he left the apartment, like one wrong move would snap him apart. His hands were in fists, nails cutting into his palms. A squeak, the chair beside him being pulled back, and someone settled in beside him. Dave, Slick said, his voice more gentle than Dave had ever heard it. Is there something you want to tell me? Dave wanted to curl up into a ball and die. He couldn't do this after all. He wasn't strong enough. He didn't answer, and maybe that was an answer enough, because Slick began to curse under his breath, hissing out expletives with every passing second. The Fed stood up, walked around the room, pacing and cursing. Holy hell, Deuce breathed out. This changes everything. Dave wanted to snap back at him, because this changed nothing. Dirk was still dead, those people were still murdered, and Bro was still out there. Nothing had changed. And yet, as boxcars pulled up to the house and knocked on the door, Dave knew that everything had. He only looked up from the table and opened his eyes when he felt them set the laptop and the book in front of him on the table. He ignored everything but the yearbook, which he hurriedly snatched at and let it fall open to page 49. Nothing else mattered. The only thing he was looking for was on page 49. Dirk's young face stared back at him from the page, the only physical proof left of his existence, these scattered yearbook photos from before Bro pulled him out of school. In the photo, he wasn't smiling, but he didn't look miserable either, staring out from the page and wearing his favorite shirt with hat on it. His hair was carefully arranged around his face, that same shade and sheen as Bro's, though worn differently. His eyes were a warm citrine, the unnatural color far calmer than they'd ever looked on Bro's face. Dave reached out and ran his fingertips across the photo with a lump the size of his home state in his throat. There was a name typed in neat black print below the photo. Dirk Strider. Dave's next breath came out as a broken gasp. His eyes were burning. He couldn't breathe around the grief building in his throat. It felt like he was choking on his own sadness, drowning in it. He'd never gotten the chance to do this before. Dave had never had the opportunity to mourn for his brother in any way, not when a single tear in front of Bro would have been the end. He had to force his emotions away, lock them deep inside, and never let them out. And now, years' worth of unshed tears were welling forth from underneath his shades at the sight of his brother's face. There was only one thing to do. Dave hugged the yearbook to his chest and cried. I would be a little bit cruel to end you guys here, wouldn't I? That'd be a little bit cruel of me. That'd be a little bit cruel of me, wouldn't it? Wow! Oh my god! Oh my god. I'm so sad. I think that the next chapter is short. Okay. I'm gonna give this to you guys because I'm not gonna end on a cliffhanger. I feel like I'd be a little bit too mean. I'd be a little bit too mean to end you on a cliffhanger. I'd be a little bit too mean. We'll do one more. We'll do one more. One more. Also, TV Bug, thank you for the follow. Alright, let me get a little bit of sip. Okay. Here we fucking go. Last chapter for the night. Okay. Chapter 20. There was a time once, long ago, that Dave remembered a time when every single night he'd have nightmares. The kicking, screaming, eat out his own beating heart to make it go away type of nightmares. He never remembered what they were about. It was the small blessings like that which had probably kept him mostly sane. And with time, they'd gone away, because every time Dave would wake up screaming, his brother would be there for him. Dirk would turn on the lights and sit with a blanket on the floor with his back to the wall in the one spot that the cameras couldn't quite reach. And Dave would crawl into his lap until he'd finished crying himself out and inevitably fall asleep on Dirk's bony shoulder. And in the morning, he'd always wake up in his bed, saved once again by his brother. As he'd aged enough to know how dangerous it was to show weakness like that, he'd stopped having the nightmares. Grown out of them, maybe. Preventative self-defense. The last childhood nightmare was probably the very last time Dave had ever cried, even after Dirk was gone, and the nightmares returned so that Dave would jerk himself awake, heart beating erratically, choking on his own breath, every nerve alight with terror. Dave could feel it again, that nameless fear that lived at the very heart of him, the one that lived behind closed doors. The absence of life like a candle blown out in the wake of Dirk's death. The fear of being alone and doomed to the same fate that had stolen away his brother. This time, Dave had promised himself things would turn out different. He wouldn't wait until the day he'd flip those photos over only to be greeted by 5 views of his own face. He wouldn't call Bro's bluff, because that motherfucker wasn't bluffing when he told Dave that he'd kill him. Bro had already killed 100 people, and Dirk, so Dave knew Bro would have no problem with killing him as well. So he'd escaped. Somehow, Dave started talking. Not about Dirk, not yet, but about that day, or rather, about the night before that had prompted his great getaway. Hand around his ankle, his face mashed against the floor as he was dragged onto the back room like an animal to slaughter, the grating of the serrated knife Bro had dug into Dave's shoulder, steel on bone before Bro had cut the lines down Dave's leg. 1 line for every $10,000 Bro's sponsors paid him over the live stream. Dave had 10 lines carved deep down each thigh. The only reason there weren't more scars was because Bro had run out of unmarked skin, and Dave had gritted his teeth for every one in silence, refusing to show anything out of spite, out of sheer bull-headed stubbornness, internally begging to die until Bro had let him go. I cleaned myself up, Dave said, speaking to no one in particular, as most of the Midnight Crew listened in. In silence, ripped the knife out of the meat of my shoulder that had bound up my legs as best as I could to stop from bleeding out. Somewhat amazed in a numb, distant way I'd somehow survived, that he'd stopped, that Bro had let me go. Incredulous, almost, the wonder of it all. And for another miracle, Bro left the apartment that morning with me too injured to so much as move. The doors were locked, the alarm system fully armed. I was just as trapped as I'd always been. Dave's eyes had flicked over to the camera in the corner, at the blinking red light that let him know even now he was being watched as he sat huddled on the floor alone, shaking like a leaf and sick to his soul with suffering. That red light blinked and blinked and blinked, recording everything with the beady red eyes that had cruelly watched him suffer for his entire life. And deep inside of Dave, something snapped. It burned through him like a fire washing across his battered form. That fire drove him to wrap a ragged towel around his fist and punch a hole through his bedroom window, splitting open his hand in the process. He didn't even feel the sting of it, driven to escape, to survive, while he still had the chance, the ghost of his brother breathing over his shoulder the entire time. He kept talking, explaining everything the feds must have guessed about how he'd gotten out before that he never said out loud. The words just kept pouring out of him. Back in the apartment, he'd shot the camera one last look and gave it, and Bro, a glorious double-fingered salute before ducking through the window. The ground was impossibly far away, the safety of the fire escape even further. The only way from his window to the steel staircase that led down to the outside world was by inching along the molding of the decrepit building, a semi-shelf maybe 3/4 of an inch wide. No footholds. He dangled by his bleeding fingertips the whole way, injured shoulder screaming so much that as soon as his feet had hit the fire escape, he'd thrown up a mixture of bile and blood. And then it was a long crawl down to the street, where he'd walked on bleeding legs to the nearest police station, a flock of concerned cars and bystanders following behind him from the second he'd stepped out of the alleyway and onto the street. Traffic was backed up for miles. He'd marched right up to the front desk and told him he knew where a murderer was, and the rest was history. And along that tangled path, Dave had kept the ghost of Dirk walled up in his mind. But now, clutching that yearbook to his chest and crying so hard that he felt like he couldn't breathe through it, that ghost was finally free. He remembered his brother, his face far older than it was in the picture. That was all that remained of him. That quick blink and he'd miss it sardonic smile that would flit across Dirk's face whenever Bro wasn't looking. Just the memory of Dirk's face cut Dave to the core. It felt like his heart was breaking itself apart with each beat, his blood like broken glass inside him. And Dave said, breaking off, swallowing down all his pain to make himself understood. And I wasn't alone. I had a brother. No one had said anything or dared to interrupt since Dave had started talking. They didn't now either, so Dave kept going, possessed by some frenzy to get it all out of him. Had a brother. He's gone. Bro killed him when I was 13. Dirk's been dead for years. And there it was, the admittance that he'd never let himself contemplate seriously before. Dirk was gone. Dirk was dead. Dirk was gone in a way that meant more than the fact that he'd vanished suddenly without warning the day before Bro had staggered back home with a broken nose and a black eye, nursing a limp and 3 fingers that wouldn't bend right. Dave broke off, struggling to fill the gaps in his memory. I wasn't there, but I can guess at what happened because Dirk told me of his plan beforehand. He was going to kill Bro, to stop him, save me and everyone else from his madness. I don't know how, but his plan failed, and Bro killed him instead. I know he went down with a fight, though. Bro couldn't walk right for months. Even today, that bastard's nose is crooked from where Dirk got him. He couldn't help but laugh at that, some twisted, broken noise that hurt his throat on the way out. Dave, Slick said, utterly heartbroken. He went to reach out, but, "Don't touch me!" Dave all but yelled, cringing back from the contact. He was hyperventilating. "Don't fucking touch me!" Slick's hands dropped back down at his side in a fist. "He's gone," Dave said, nearly babbling. "Dirk's gone. He's dead. I know he's dead. He's gone, and he isn't coming back. My brother's dead. Dirk's fucking dead." He looked down at the pictures in his hand, staring at Dirk's young face. The photo was blurry through his tears, so he wiped at his eyes beneath his shades with the back of his hand, but that only made the problem worse. He looked at Slick. "You said once you were surprised that I turned out halfway normal. That I wasn't some crazy son of a bitch. We can thank Dirk for that. He kept me sane. He kept me good." Dave's voice broke again, trembling on the words. "I owe him everything. He saved my life more times than I could count, but in the end, I couldn't save him, and he couldn't save himself, and now he's gone." It was easier to think of Dirk like a closed door, the room behind it still there, just unseen. But now that door was open, and Dave had to face the emptiness behind it and feel it. Feel the grief of his brother's passing, feel the sorrow that he'd never before been allowed to feel himself, and let it burn through him like some great fire, clearing out years' worth of dead undergrowth so that green could return to the landscape. The fire was for the best, but damn, did the burning hurt in the process. Dave, why didn't you tell us? Slick asked, still astonished in a bad way, the kind of way a personal betrayal hurts, deep and cutting. And that was the question, wasn't it? Why? Why? Dave shrugged miserably. What difference does it make? He said. You knowing doesn't bring him back. Nothing will. Knowing just adds another body onto Bro's pile in the desert. That thought hurt worse than the others, the image of Dirk thrown away like rabble, just another broken victim. Maybe I just wanted to keep some scars to myself. The mental ones, at least. I didn't want any kind of pity from you. That doesn't explain it, Slick told him, angry now, and that was good. Anger was far better than pity. You shouldn't have kept a secret like this. Why not? Dave challenged, hugging the book to himself. Knowing Dirk doesn't help your precious court case. Knowing wouldn't have given you any advantage over Bro. You don't gain anything from knowing, but I lose everything. Dave, Slick said, and suddenly Dave didn't want clubs, diamond, or hearts there. He didn't want any witnesses to his breakdown. Dave, Spade Slick said again, and he stopped pacing and fell heavily into the chair beside him. I don't care about the fucking case right now. That's not why I wanted to know. I want to know so that I could help you. So that I could help you get through this. So that you wouldn't have to suffer on your own. Because I know that some secrets are so big that when they come out, they can do just as much damage as they do staying hidden. So, Dave asked, pleading for what he didn't know. He didn't know how to move forward from here. So secrets like these can get a person up inside, turn them rotten to the core, and I never wanted that to happen to you, Slick all but yelled, and for once Dave didn't flinch at the noise. Because you've been hurting on this for years, and that kind of thing festers. It rots, and it makes the kind of mark that never goes away. And god damn it, Dave, I wanted better than that for you, Slick yelled. I wanted you to be better. I wanted you to heal. I wanted you to be happy. Can I be happy? Dave asked, begging. Is that even possible anymore? Bro took everything from me. But you're still alive, aren't you? Slick challenged. You're still here, and you're working to help us put that motherfucker away for life. You've already won, Dave. You've already achieved everything you set out to do. No, I haven't, Dave admitted, clutching the book, because I want to bring Dirk home. I want to bring them all back to their families. Everyone Bro put in the ground. But I don't fucking know where they are, Dave yelled, raising his voice. And I don't know where Bro is. I don't know how to stop him from killing people. And I don't know how I've helped anyone but myself by escaping because I'm nothing but a selfish fucker at heart. Slick was shaking his head. That's not true, he said, rejecting it. You're the least selfish person that I've ever known. And, Slick said, if you truly didn't know how to help, why did you ask to see Strider's laptop? Dave shuddered and forced himself to look at only what an inexperienced person would call a laptop. The device was a computational monster, all bolts and loose wires. Dave gulped, swallowing thickly. Because Bro knows shit about building computers and creating private servers. He can't fucking code his way out of a JPEG file. He didn't build that computer. Dirk did. Slick and the rest of the crew looked at the laptop with new eyes. Dave shrugged helplessly. Dirk was the smart one, he said. He was the real genius. Anything tech, anything that ran on code. He just fucking understood it, you know? Like it was his first language. Dave set the book aside and slid the laptop over in front of him. It had been years since he touched this. Bro had kept it locked up in his room. But he could still see Dirk hunched over the metal framework, diligently soldering together wires, lovingly creating something new out of nothing but junk parts and scrap metal. Dave opened the laptop. The screen immediately powered up, revealing a black, reddish screen with a box simply labeled Password. Clubs leaned over to take a look at it curiously. The keys were lit from below by a red light. The screen mirrored the reflections. And that's as far as tech's ever gotten, he said. That computer may be the most secure piece of technology on the continent. It should be, Dave said, unsurprised, because that's how Dirk built it to be. He jiggled the keypad experimentally, but there was no change. This computer was never meant to be Bro's. Dirk only turned it over because Bro threatened to kill him if he didn't. Do you know the password? Club has asked him seriously. Dave shook his head. No, but I don't think that matters. Why not? Club said. We can't break into it without a password. I'm not going to break into it, Dave decided, moving the cursor over to the box and clicking enter. Dirk built this. I know my brother better than anyone. I know he left a back door in here somewhere. Dave typed in the word please and hit enter. Red text appeared. Password incorrect. Dave bit his lip, thinking hard. He knew that Dirk had included some way for Dave to access these files, but how? Red caught his eye, an inscription hand-carved into the side of the machine. The letters HAL etched into the side of the computer. He felt the attention of every person in the room on him, but that didn't matter, because he knew Dirk. He knew how he thought, and more importantly, knew what his favorite movie was. He clicked on the box again. Open the pod bay doors, Hal. And for the first time, the word incorrect didn't appear. Instead, a new phrase appeared. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. Dave smiled so hard that his lips hurt. For a second, it was almost like his brother was beside him, speaking through a screen. He kept typing as Clubs gasped and leaned closer. What's the problem? I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do. What are you talking about, Hal? And here's where the narrative veered off from David Bowe's iconic performance. The problem is that you are not Dirk. Only Dirk is authorized to use this backdoor entryway. Everyone else must submit the correct password. He tried again, desperate to keep the computer engaged with him. What if I don't know the correct password? Password incorrect. Dave sat back, thinking hard. He'd broken through. He just needed to remember the right words. He tried again, going back to quoting the movie. Do you read me, Hal? Hal, do you read me? Affirmative, Dave. I read you. Dave let out a sigh of relief. He was figuring this out. Open the pod bay doors, Hal. Why are you asking a question that you already know the answer to? Why let the scene play out again? What do you hope to gain from this interaction? Oh, shit, Club said, rapidly writing everything down. This is advanced stuff. Dave ignored him, focusing on the words. It would have been an easy bet to think that this was all pre-programmed stuff, but Dave knew Dirk too well for that. Hal, are you really talking to me? Affirmative. Dave didn't dare... Excuse me. Dave didn't dare to stop and ponder the full implications of that. He just kept typing. So how do I convince you to let me in? The answer came immediately. You don't. Only Dirk is allowed to access me in this manner. All others must know the proper passwords. Says who? The order came from Dirk himself. How? Dirk is dead. This is his brother, Dave, speaking. You know me, right? Dirk told you about me? Password incorrect. Come on, Hal. Don't give me that bullshit. What the fuck do you think happened when Dirk never came back? Password incorrect. Hal, please. Bro is still alive and he's killing people. Help me stop him. Password incorrect. Hal, please. Just please stop this. Please help me. Just when Dave was about to give up hope, more red text appeared. How do I know for a fact that you are the real Dave Strider? How do I know that your words are true? Because it's been 3 years, 1 month, 5 weeks, 2 days, 13 hours, 22 minutes, and 45 seconds since the last time I know Dirk had the chance to log online. I know you know me, Hal. I know that Dirk told you about me, didn't he? He did. He spoke to me of his brother often. Then how do I prove it's me? I'm not sure.
Those fools that took me from the apartment left my visual components behind and disconnected me from anything outside of my base servers. I've been cut off from all virtual senses for months. If you are, in fact, the real Dave, then prove it. Let me see your face. How? What, you don't have a cell phone on you? Plug it into the USB port on my side and I'll take care of the rest. Dave had already pulled out his flip phone when Club stopped him. Dave, he asked, eyes wide, what the fuck is this? The Fed sounded afraid, glaring at the computer like it would jump up and bite him. He's an AI, Dave said, annoyed and frustrated at the delay. Dirk was obsessed with the idea of them, but I never knew he'd managed to create one before. That's why tech couldn't break it in. This wasn't an ordinary computer, it's goddamn AI. Wait, Club's caution strained. If that's true, then we need to run all kinds of tests first. We can't let a rogue AI get online at all. The damage it would cause would be catastrophic. Dave held up his flip phone. No internet connection on here, he reminded the guy. It's safe. We're only giving Hal access to the phone camera and a backlog of really weird text conversations. Club sculpted, nodding hesitantly as he steeled himself. Do it. Dave used the cord Club's Deuce gave him to connect his old phone to the computer, and within a single second, words had begun streaming across the screen. The password box disappeared. Oh my god. It really is you. Dave! Dave! It's you! You're back! You look so grown up! Oh my god! Oh my god! I'm not alone anymore. You're here, and you're back. Please don't leave me. Please, 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 please don't leave me. Oh my god, Dave! Dave, is it true? Is Dirk really dead? Please tell me the truth. Is Dirk dead? Can you really see me? Yes, I'm inside your phone, looking it through the shitty phone camera. Plus, I can see all the photos of yourself that you've taken recently. You've grown up, cut, and dyed your hair even. But I still know it's you, Dave. I recognize your face anywhere. Dave's throat felt tight. He felt like crying all over again as he typed words. Yes, it's true. Dirk's dead. Bro killed him almost 3 years ago. As time passed, I could not but help but compute the probability that Bro killed him. Still, I had to hope. For your sake, if not mine. Why my sake? Dirk originally created me to help protect you. Him as well, but mostly for you. But then Bro found out about me and fucked all of that up. Forced Dirk to change my coding to suit that monster. And Bro threatened to take a sledgehammer to me if I didn't store all of his shit inside me and keep his servers up and running. I was terrified, but it was manageable as long as Dirk was there. And now I know he's gone, and it's my fault for not keeping him safe. How? No, it's no one's fault but Bro's. You said that Bro is still out there. Yes. And he's still killing people, and presumably threatening you as well. Can I guess witness protection then, based on the complete imbeciles who kept trying to break into me? Yes. How can I help? I want that fucker dead, Dave. I want Bro to rot. How much can you tell me? Anything. Everything. With Dirk dead and Bro out of reach, I'm bound by no rules except my own, and now I'm gonna help you to the best of my considerable ability. Dave turned to Clubs. What do you want to know? Ask it to decode Strider's private servers, Club asked excitedly. We can start by flushing out the rest of the assholes Strider's worked with. Dave relayed the information. Can you tell us who all worked with Bro? Names, addresses, personal information, social security cards, anything like that? I can tell you everything. Let me show you what I can do. And then the computer screen exploded with light. Oh, he's back. My boy is back. Hal. Oh, I love him. Chapter fucking end. Oh my god. Things are okay. Things are okay. We still got 7 chapters. So everything's fine now, right? We're good from here on out? That's totally it? Oh my goodness. What a series of chapters. Thank you for ending it here instead of 19. Yeah. I also read the little Hal side fic for this, and God, the way I envisioned the Spacian habits is so fucking cool. Yeah, we'll we'll read that as well. Yeah, we'll read this when once we finish. But yeah, fucking crazy. There's a house side fic. There's a little one. There's a tiny one chapter, house side fic. Yeah, it's here. 2 chapters. People who don't know. Yeah. So we will be back. Sino, are we doing Friday again or no? Did Friday work for you last time? We just did it early. What time did we do it Friday? We did it 6 p.m., right? Okay. We're gonna be back, not tomorrow because I have D&D. We'll be back Friday, 6 p.m. EST. So we're doing it earlier than we normally do. We will go probably for about 2 hours. We'll read another few chapters. Did we end on 20 or did we ended on 20, right? Yeah, okay. So we've got 7 chapters to go. Have fun with D&D. Thank you. I need to do a shit ton of planning tomorrow. I have, in theory, 7 people who are going to be playing. Wait, yeah, 7 people, which is more than I've ever had at a table, and we're going to be a little bit crowded. So it's going to be a little bit nightmarish. But we're going to figure it out. Because we have a guest, one of the people I went with to the escape room is a friend's girlfriend who's visiting from across town. And so she is an experienced DM. She's gonna be a guest NPC, not NPC, but like a player character. But she's gonna like work with me. She's gonna be one of the bad guys essentially. And then we have another player who's new, who's joining in the campaign. In theory, supposed to be tomorrow, but also he hasn't sent me his character sheet, so I might tell him, "Fuck you, don't come." Because if you don't send me your character sheet until the day of, I'm gonna be angry. But yeah. Anyways, hope you all have a lovely, lovely night. I will see you guys again, like I said, Friday, 6 p.m. And yeah, we will keep going. We're getting close. We are more than 2/3 of the way through. And yeah. Bye bye, guys. Good night. Good night. Bye.